Welcome, teacher friend. I'm Lori.
And I'm Melissa.
We are two literacy educators in Baltimore. We want the best for all kids, and we know you do too.
Our district recently adopted a new literacy curriculum, which meant a lot of change for everyone. Lori and I can't wait to keep learning about literacy with you today.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Literacy Podcast. Melissa and Lori love literacy. We are very excited about today's episode because we are talking with a very special guest. And Melissa, I know we just talked about this guest on last week's episode of the podcast, so I feel like listeners will be familiar with her, but we are excited to talk with her directly today, not about her.
That's right. Yep. Yeah. Trey Hadrick on our episode last week, if you didn't listen, he talked all about Faith Borkowski and her book, If Only I Would Have Known. And we're going to talk about it with her today. So we're super excited. So
I'm so excited.
Welcome, Faith.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you both. I'm so excited to be here with you. Really. What a pleasure.
Yeah. Well, we're excited to read all your books and to watch you on the literacy documentary. Like, you are taking your fame status to new heights with that documentary, right?
You know what? I'm taking a backseat to Nora. Man, what she is doing.
Yeah.
She is just killing it.
I know.
So
she's
excited.
a champ.
I know Nora, and she's just a great person. So excited to be a part of it.
Yeah. Well, thank you for being a part of it. And before we jump into our conversation today, would you mind sharing a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So I've been in education, I can't even believe I'm saying this, 35 years. And I started off as a classroom teacher, reading specialist. And then I was fortunate enough to become a coach with the Reading First Initiative. So I was a regional coach, and I was also an administrator for a literacy program. And now I do private work. I'm a consultant. I'm working with a school district presently. I just wrote about that recently in a blog. Lynbrook School District here on Long Island. First one, I think, that actually decided to go completely all in and change their reading program from kindergarten and up. So I'm super excited about that. But my heart is always with parents, families. That's something that is my number one concern, getting the message out to families, because I've witnessed the heartbreak firsthand as someone who works privately with children. Mm-hmm. And I wrote about it in a couple of books. My first one was actually called Reading Intervention Behind School Walls. And then that book was read by someone, maybe you know him, Don Wynn, who writes his own books, and he is dyslexic himself, wanted to get the book out there in a bigger way. And we came up with a different title and cover, and we made it better. And that book is called Failing Students or Failing Schools, A Parent's Guide to Reading Instruction and Intervention. Mm-hmm. And it won an award. It won the Wishing Shelf Award. And I was very proud of that because I don't consider myself an author, even though, yes, I wrote books.
You definitely are.
I'm a teacher.
It's like you are.
I know when people introduce me and you know, I tell them author, I'm like, I really did that. That was also a super cool thing that I feel proud of, but in my heart, I'm still a teacher. Mm-hmm. So in writing that book, I got a lot of recognition from families, schools, teachers, people from all over the world. That book opened up, a world to me that I didn't know, people from other countries. Mm-hmm. And in doing that, people would read the book and then they said, oh boy, I wish I had this book when my child first started school. So that was the first sign. And then having worked with kids again and again, it was like Groundhog Day. So I could say it. We just had Groundhog Day. Right?
Yeah.
And so it was like the movie, the Bill Murray movie, where that day kept repeating itself again and again and again, where I would assess a child and then the parents would have tears in their eyes and they would get choked up, either actually crying or sounding like they were on the verge of crying. And it would almost be a moan, like, if only I would have known. And I said, bingo, that's the title. Mm-hmm. It's authentic. It's real. It's what I heard. I put it in quotes because that is what it is. That kind of deep regret, that deep regret that if I could turn the clock back, I would. And that's how my newest book came about. It really is written so that we could avoid these types of conversations where perhaps people would know about literacy instruction well before they start going down that road of intervention and IEP meetings and program after program of being disappointed. Mm-hmm. And so I wrote this in a way that would reach, I felt, a large number of people, a diverse group of people. And I particularly picked a way that I felt would be easy, accessible to understand. I enlisted the help of my very good friend, who is now my friend for almost 40 years, my friend Cheryl Rosenstock Marcus, who is a graphic artist. Mm-hmm. And she knows me deeply and understood what I wanted to do with this. And she used her talent to come up with fantastic pictures that really supported the message without it getting too cutesy and overtaking, what I wanted to say. It just supports it. It gives it a lot of space between print so that even someone with low literacy skills could pick this book up and understand it. And that's what I wanted to convey to your audience today, that I'm on a mission to help communities and people, especially who have been marginalized over the years and don't really know this message. That's my goal, is to get that out there.
Well, that's beautiful.
Yeah. And I think from just my own personal standpoint, accomplished that. It was a super easy read. I have a 3-year-old, and it's hard to do anything with him around, but I literally was able to, he was playing with some toys and I was able to pick this up and read it and get it. I have a lot of background knowledge about the topic, but still, it was really easy to get it. And I learned things, I was like, man, I didn't even realize playing with Play-Doh was something that will help him later with reading. So things that even were helpful for me, someone who you think has a lot of background in what to do for kids for literacy.
Yeah.
I and thank you for saying that, because not only did I want to get the message out to communities who might not hear this message, but to parents like yourself, where you're busy, you're working, you have other responsibilities, but this is a book that you can get through. You can put it down, you could easily pick it up, and you will get the important message. I cut out a lot of the unnecessary stuff and just wanted to get to the heart of it. I'm really about practical, common sense solutions. I think we've had enough of the theory. I've been at this for a long time, and that's why I really do believe in a backdoor approach. that the schools, certainly we're on to something now. And with the internet, the message is getting out. More schools are trying to learn this science of reading. But I almost feel that is almost intimidating, the science of reading.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's very intimidating, where it almost feels like you really need a high level of knowledge to make change. And I think that in some ways we scare people off that, hey, we need to just lower the temperature and look at common sense things that we could be doing. And I like talking to people like I'm talking to you. We're friends. We're girlfriends. Let's talk like girlfriends instead of, oh, I know more, or this is my title. And that's the message I want to get across when I talk to people in the community. You can do it. You don't need to have specialized knowledge to understand this. And you could do a lot with just knowing the basics. You really can.
Yeah. When you think about affecting change over the course of, the time this book was released in 2019, have you heard any stories about how this has affected change that you might want to share with listeners? Because I just think it echo everything that you just said. It is so easy to digest, and the message is very clear. It has some really easy and specific ways for you as parents to support or even like preschool teachers, right? To support your child or your students. But I'm curious if you have any kind of community stories that you might want to uplift us with right now.
Well, you spoke to Trey. And so I don't want to repeat something that he might have said. I don't know. But he used this book, the If Only book, with a group of men. Now, right there, that to me is super cool. Right? That you have an African-American man leading a book club with other African-American men in a community where, literacy is an issue, where it's one of these issues where it perpetuates itself. And these wonderful men, the Norristown Men of Excellence, want to spread the word. And they use this book as a book club study. And you have a barber now who wants to teach other people to read. I mean, that to me is incredible. The other men, one was in education at, I forget, Trey's a counselor, a guidance counselor. I forget the other positions that the men had, but they were fathers. They were men in the community, educators, and then business owners. I mean, that to me is the most exciting thing. And what's happening, which is really unbelievable, the decodable books, I don't know if you know of them, Phonic Books, Tammy Frankfurt is leading this. And I asked her if she could send decodable books to this barber shop. And she's
Trey shared. That's so excited. I know.
That's really cool.
And he's setting up a little corner in the barbershop with decodable books. And I'm going to have my books also available. And Trey bought 10 of my books to use for book studies, but also just to keep it there in the barbershop. And this is a way to start conversations. Because in the African-American community, the barbershop is like a club. People, I've learned this from having these deep conversations with Trey, that it's a meeting place for men and boys to talk. And so how wonderful is that? to be able to have a conversation about literacy where you don't have to get into a science with like title and researchers but it is based obviously on the science, but it totally is friendly to approach people with. Now these men want to be able to start sharing this message with other people. And that to me is what it's about. Lori, you mentioned before about wanting to start, a train every month of having books go into offices, in doctors' offices, pediatricians. That's my goal. I want it to be in maternity wards. I would like this to be a gift for a new mom. And for, parents who are just learning about talking to their kids, that this is the way it's done. Yes, it's talk. Yes, we read aloud. That message has been said many times. Read to your kid 15 minutes a day. But it gives parents this thought that magically, poof, the words are going to just be there and they're automatically going to read. And it doesn't happen that way.
Right.
So
and then it gives them it actually, what I love about it is it says in the book, you're sharing and saying what they should be able to do, and then kind of getting at the fact that the intervention, you're saying it, but I think that parents can make that connection. Unfortunately, it sounds like Jill was not given the right intervention. Right? Like it's very clear. And I'm imagining a parent reading this book thinking, oh, okay, so the intervention they just described, that sounds a lot like what my child is getting right now. And, but then you're going on to explain what that intervention is and elaborating. So can I read a couple sentences? Do you mind?
Yeah, of course. I just want to let the audience know. I don't know if I put it clearly. This is in play format. So it's
thank you.
Yeah. So it's not only illustrated with some terrific supporting artwork. There's also a message that it's from a family. The point of view, I did it where there's a mom talking to a pediatrician, to a preschool teacher, and to a librarian, so that she could learn how to help her child, because the other two, the older children, already went through this already, and they've had interventions that did not work. So I didn't want it to be in my voice. I wanted this book. The Failing Students book isn't my voice. It's my story. It's part memoir and then, advice. But this one, I did not want it to be in my voice. I wanted it to be like a typical family that I've had before. And that this is the mom's way of learning. And so certainly you could read some lines. I just wanted to make it clear that it is in this play format.
Thank you. So it's a mom with 3 children, but the child who we're talking about all the kids, but zeroing in on really getting ahead for that youngest child, because the other 2 kids have, quote, kind of gone through the system already. And now she's trying to backfill or intervene for them. And the youngest, we're hoping to get it right, quote, the first time. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Exactly.
So I'm just going to read a little part. Unfortunately, it sounds like Jill was not given the right intervention. Memorizing words and using pictures do not really teach a child how to read unknown or hard words. Now that Jill's in 4th grade and the books no longer have pictures or other cues to help her, she's struggling. She really needs to learn to actually read the words accurately and fluently. That will help her forever. And I wrote snaps next to that. I was like, yes. Because I think that, I imagined educators and parents just being like, oh, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. There's no more pictures once we hit 3rd and 4th grade. And that seems to be when they're struggling. And just, even though it's kind of like a obvious thing, I think it's really important to point that out, especially for community members or families who are in that situation. Like I feel like, in K through 2, sometimes, parents are like, oh, they're doing well. Everything's going fine. And then they get to 3rd grade and it's like a screeching halt. And it's really, nothing was fine along the way. It's really that's when things become more illuminated, because you cannot look at the pictures any longer.
Right.
So,
but it's so obvious when you say it, but it's not necessarily obvious for parents, right? Who don't know what happened there.
Right. Which is why I think this is brilliant, because it's very cut and dry and clear. It's like, oh, this is why I've been thinking this, and I'm imagining, moms and dads who don't have an education background, or even educators who are wondering what's happening in their classroom, why kids haven't been able to read over and over again. Like, this is big aha right here.
It is a big aha. I can tell you that I talk to teachers all the time, and we think that this information is out there and that by this point they should know. And I can tell you they don't. And those that are getting this information, sometimes it's overwhelming for them. They are overwhelmed. You give a teacher a certain book where they don't have the background or the practical knowledge. It just seems like a bunch of jargon. That's why, even though Failing Students has in the title a parent's guide, it easily could be for a teacher. And I've said this numerous times. And community board members have picked the book up and brought it to meetings to share. But, it becomes controversial in some cases, because they don't want to necessarily change. They want to find ways to keep what they have and fill in gaps. That's
right, which we know doesn't work so much. Yeah.
Doesn't work. And what you said before about not assuming, that's how I approach everything. I approach it where I assume you don't, and I want to make everything as basic, digestible, easy to understand, accessible, practical. I just want it to be where anybody could ask me anything and not feel stupid about asking that question.
Faith, I'm wondering if you could talk a little more about, you already mentioned that, it's the mom going to talk to the pediatrician, the preschool teacher, and the librarian. I'm wondering what made you land on those 3.
Yeah.
And what you were hoping people got from that conversation.
So I try to think of people who would be in contact with a child before formal schooling. And I think families sometimes are too close to this. They see this child every day. They get used to certain patterns, and they are not aware of those signs. And so they might not know that there are signs really from birth through 2. And so I really think it's important for a pediatrician to make this part of a well checkup, a literacy checkup. I think it's important. Now, what's out there, what I've seen, this is not new. I'm not creating this discussion. But what I see is they have these flyers where the words are written this small and it's by experts. And you have to have a certain degree of literacy, being able to read to feel comfortable with that and to be able to advocate for your child. It's intimidating, and it's not being picked up in clinics, that's for sure. So who reads this? People who already know about this, the dyslexia moms, the parent groups, the white suburban moms that are, really have a college education. I want to reach people who really don't have that kind of access, who cannot digest that, who would look at that piece of paper and think, I don't even know what this means. I can't even ask questions. I wanted to make it friendly. So that was my goal with the pediatrician, that you first get your information about children from your pediatrician. This should be basic information, having that conversation. Next step is parents go back to work. Where are their kids in daycare and preschools? So who should know about that? And you have a lot of people who run home daycare centers, and they might not have masters in reading, and they are doing what they were taught and they think is right. We just expose kids to books, and we just make it fun, and we sing the ABC song, and that's enough. I want to make preschool teachers and daycare workers know that they can affect change if they just knew. And then my last one, the librarian, well, they have access to books, right? But you don't find decodable books in a library. And my daughter is a librarian. And so I have a sweet spot for librarians. She did not go into being a children's librarian. She's a reference librarian. But I really feel that librarians are underutilized in the community. And so you talk about a community that's African American and Hispanic. And from what Trey told me, the library is underutilized. It's not a place where many people in his community go for pleasure. They might go there if, let's say, they need to go, but it's not that welcoming place. And I went to visit Trey in his community, and I have to tell you, I was disappointed with that library. And it just wasn't the kind of library that says, oh, yes, we want to be there to educate the community. They talk about certain things, but they're not really taking an active role in this. And I think that they are the people who could make such a difference and at least know what decodable books are and have them available. So to be clear, those decodable books mirror the phonics curriculum that kids should be getting in school. So that would be the next step. Parents would know, oh, I could take out these books. My kids are learning how to read print. And now here are books that can support that. So another great series is from Piper Books, the beginning reading instruction, advanced reading instruction. And those are also decodable books. They sent me some books that are for mature readers. And I plan on giving my books to that barbershop too. That's what I'm going to do. I have them here, but I'm going to give it to the barbershop.
Yeah, and use them, right?
I want that to become a resource center, a pilot for something like this. I would love a church to become a pilot because I know, you know what? People go to supermarkets, laundromats, churches, barbershops, beauty parlors. This is where the information needs to be. And then, of course, those community members like pediatricians, early childhood workers, and librarians could then be educated. That's my goal. So that's my 10-year plan.
I love it.
That's so good. I was just talking. Oh, go ahead, Melissa.
Oh, I was just going to say, because, I do have a 3-year-old, right? So he falls in that age range you're talking about. And, when I think of, we go to the pediatrician, I mean, and I like my pediatrician a lot. So I'm not like bad mouthing my pediatrician, but she does, it's like, are you reading to him? Great. Check. And there's like a couple, questions that are more specific around, I don't remember what they were, like, speech mostly. But same for, like, I send him to preschool. I honestly don't know what he does most days. Sometimes something's sent home and I'm like, oh, you learned A today. Okay.
Yeah.
But what it even did for me, like, even though I have a literacy background, like knowing what kinds of questions to ask them, right? If they're not asking me any questions, what kinds of questions can I ask my pediatrician or the preschool teacher?
Yeah.
We haven't been to the library as much with COVID, but hopefully when things get better, we'll get back there more. But it really was helpful for me to like, oh, I can ask them questions too. And this gave me some questions to ask them.
Well, it's interesting, Melissa, that you say that because I take dance lessons. That's just something I do for pleasure. And
love that.
My dance teacher, it's ballroom and Latin dancing. And my dance teacher has 2 young children. And when she read my books, she decided to interview preschool teachers to see what they knew.
Yeah.
Well, she wasn't satisfied and she decided to keep them at home.
Oh my gosh.
She decided she could do a better job based on what I tell her. And she just decided I could do this myself, because if they're going to start having him memorize words, and they were very proud of it. When she interviewed some preschools in the area, they were like, oh, we start with sight words and we do this and that. And they thought they were telling her something that would sell the preschool.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And she was just flawed. And she just said, okay, I am just not going to even bother doing this. I'm going to do this myself. And that's just funny that you say that. So,
yeah. I did think, I was like, where is this preschool teacher in this book? I would like Elliot to go to this preschool.
my hope, Melissa, my hope is that, maybe this could be a way. It's like subliminal messages, right? Like, maybe I can make my school be the first to look like this.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the goal of the book, is to put it into the hands of the people so someone like you could ask, well, where are you getting these questions from? Oh, here, why don't you read this?
Mm-hmm.
And maybe you could start making those changes to align more to what the research is. You don't have to really read the research. Why don't you just start here doing some of those things?
Mm-hmm. That's interesting that you say that about reading the research, because I think a lot of people do feel overwhelmed with that. There's so much. And we do get lots of questions from listeners or lots of inquiries along those lines. Like, this is so overwhelming. Where do you think I should start? And I love the idea of learning something and then trying it in practice. And along the way, you're naturally going to gather the resources and the research that you need to keep you focused on your journey. And I think that that's how Melissa and I really authentically got into this as well, is, that when we were in Baltimore, when we adopted Wit and Wisdom, and we also had foundations, we really started learning about the science of reading and what knowledge building meant, and how to build skills and knowledge at the same time, as well as, making sure that those foundational skills are shored up through, systematic instruction and consistency of that, and what that looks like across a grade band and throughout the grade bands. And it was the practice that made us see it. And then we pulled out and we were like, where is the research now? And we were ready for the research because we saw it in practice. Mm-hmm. But that's, I think, not always the access point that everyone has. So I love I love in the book, just try it, right? Just try the Play-Doh and try make letters using the Play-Doh, or grip the Play-Doh, build your strength skills. And that, it's helping people feel encouraged that they're doing something that is good for kids and it's also research-based, but they haven't read like a 29-page report about the effects of Play-Doh on reading science, or,
my whole idea with the Play-Doh was the fine motor and building strength. And these kids, all they do now is they touch a keyboard.
Yeah.
That at the youngest age, they're playing with electronics. There's no pincer grip anymore.
Right.
I used to give my kids Cheerios, and I always made a joke that my daughter in particular, I have two kids. My son is older, and my daughter was the fussy eater. And she would hold one Cheerio in her hand and nibble on it. She was so fussy. And how do you just munch on one Cheerio?
So little.
This wasn't an eater. And what? I have to tell you, she was the artist.
That's funny.
She had a good pincer grip.
That is funny. Yeah, because she's worked those muscles for a long time.
But seriously, she did both of them. I always put out the Play-Doh and different things. My son had more difficulties with fine motor, and I had to do a little bit more with him in that regard. But he was the one who spoke first. And, they had their strengths. But one thing I did learn from working with both of them was this idea of clearly showing them letters and sounds. I didn't even know what I was doing at the time. I really didn't. I was a reading specialist, and I just knew, expose them to books, read books to them. They didn't have those difficulties, but somehow I did start showing them to put two sounds together, add another one in, using these Sesame Street blocks and just showing them how sounds are pushed together. Only later did I start learning, after I read a book that I know you recommend. I think I saw it on your recommended list, the Diane McGinnis book, Why Our Children Don't Read and What You Can Do About It. Is that on your list? Or maybe I'm wrong.
It might. I don't know. I don't have memorized what's on the list, but we have heard of that book.
It's interesting because I did look at some books that you recommended, and I thought that was one of your recommended books. If not, maybe I made a mistake. But that book changed my life. It
will be if it's not, because it changed your life and it led you to write more books like this. We're going to put it on our list.
You absolutely should put that on your list. That book, I wrote about it in Failing Students or Failing Schools. That book absolutely changed my whole focus. And I ended up going for my own training. It wasn't like it was handed to me. I did this myself. And it put me on the path to learn more. And I want to spread the message as best as I could.
I paused for a moment when you asked because I have reading reflex in front of me.
Okay.
And that is also McGinnis authors. And I was like, are they related? But I have the book that you shared. I think Nora recommended to us.
Oh, okay. Nora definitely would. So Nora was a phonographics trainer. And so EBLI came out of some of that work from phonographics. And I'm working also with John Walker, who does the Sounds Right program. He also was a phonographics trainer. And that's how Sounds Right approaches their work, speech to print.
Got it.
And so we're a group of people who went down the phonographics path. And what led us all to phonographics was the Diane McGinnis book, Why Our Children Can't Read and What We Could Do About It. And that was the link between us, between Nora and myself when we met, that we talked about that. And in speaking with John Walker and his Sounds Right, that was a link, how we also started talking, because we all really believe in that approach.
Yeah. I think what you're speaking of is this little community that's happening right now. And I like, if people are listening, you're part of it too. You know, I mean, Faith, you've been a part of it for a little bit longer than Melissa and I have, and I don't know where everybody out there listening is on their journey, but there are so many of us now, and it is coming to light. And there are so many things we can do. And, you know, I think for me, what I'm taking away from this conversation is it's the little things that we can do, and also being really creative. Like, I love the idea. Like, I just, you know, I shared on Trey's podcast, I purchased this book for my pediatrician. I'm going to write a little letter sharing about the current reading curriculum in our county. And potentially also Richard Gentry had a piece recently where he called out the 5 programs that may be harmful for your child, if, you know, for reading. And one of them is the one that we use in the county that I live in. And so I am hopeful that with some treats and some books and some knowledge, you know, the pediatricians in that office will read, learn, and then share with their community, you know, and it's this like grassroots effort that you're speaking of, that you were a part of, you know, a little while before us. And now you're still a part of, thankfully. And we are now part of, and how we can continue to spread the good word. And, you know, I keep thinking about really creative things, such as I was talking with a colleague before I jumped on here, whose husband is a librarian, and he does little podcast listening groups, and then they all get together virtually and discuss. And I was telling her I was about to jump on with you, and she was like, "Oh, you'll have to talk to my husband. We'll get the playlist together for the podcasts, and then, you know, everybody can read the book, and they can all discuss." And I was like, this is what we're talking about. Things like that, where people just want to come together and learn. You know, I mean, I think I said your question could just be, how do kids learn how to read? You know, like, very basically. And I think you'd have a lot of interested parents and community members and grandparents, and
exactly
at the ready.
Exactly. And, you know, once people know there are programs out there that are doable for parents, they might need support. They might need a little guidance. But what I want to get across is you don't always need to be certified in Orton Gillingham. I really want to get that across, that I'm not saying that schools shouldn't support training, professional development. Every teacher should have a, you know, broad-based knowledge of what reading is. But what I'm saying is 80% of the kids, 85% of the kids out there, at least, if they just were taught, these are the letters, focus on the sounds, push the sounds together, read the word, the end. Say the sounds, read the word. If you want to spell a word, here's the word, say it, very good. Now think about the sounds and write those letters, say the sounds, check it back, good. I mean, like, as simple as that it does not have to be a certification process to be able to get common sense into the hands of people. And that, see, the UK, I have to say, they really are much more practical, pragmatic in their approach. I feel like here, Americans, the better, the more expensive, the more you do, the more props, the more materials. Oh, better and bigger. You know, it has to be worth something. And something that's inexpensive, like I've mentioned before, you know, I support a program called WordWasp that now is in an American version. And I talk about that it can be done. It can be done where parents could take charge of this. Other people can tutor and pick up and help others if they just had a little bit of knowledge. Doesn't take all that much. That's what I want to get across.
how many hours would you say, like, in your opinion? And I know this is probably a tricky question because I'm not giving you any information about the child who you might be working with. But if you were to work with a child who's struggling, I don't know, maybe let's just say first grade student struggling reader, has not had systematic instruction. It comes to you, you're not sure what they've had before, they're now in front of you. I feel like I'm describing a lot of first grade teachers' experiences. Mm-hmm. How many hours, like, could you do one-on-one to help this child? Because I feel like the global understanding is, well, it's going to take hundreds of hours. But my understanding is it's not. It's just not that many hours to get kids reading.
It really depends on their language skills. It depends on some of these underlying issues. So I'm not going to lie to you. There are some kids where it is harder to change certain patterns and certain ways that they think reading is supposed to be, right? It takes longer. But if you started with a clean slate, like nobody touched these kids and told them anything, I would think it would go very quickly for most kids.
And you mean like told them anything like faith, like look at the pictures when you're struggling.
Exactly. Okay. And see, and that's the issue. Could you get kids right out of the womb where basically you just read to them and you just shared great stories, and it was when it was time to work with them, you could just start off with the most basic things without starting to give them all this information that leads them on bird walks. Oh, you look at the picture, get your mouth ready, skip words.
Guess when you're
all
not
these
sure.
Types of things where we are creating dyslexia by doing that. And so, and that doesn't mean dyslexia doesn't exist, but there is an element of artificially induced dyslexia, as my friend Don Potter would say, that it absolutely is true. There are some kids where if they just started off with the right instruction, they would be fine. But then you have those other kids where, of course, there is an element of where you would have to do more. But it would be just more, longer, more intensive. But it doesn't have to be where you're breaking bad habits in order to start all over again. That's what the problem is. You want to try to get this before it starts. Let parents know right away before they're even school age so that they could then, know what's going on and be involved.
Yeah. That's thank you for talking through that, because I am always wondering, from an expert, what that looks like, what that scope and sequence looks like. And I'm hearing you say it's different for every individual child based on their experiences and what they come to you with.
Well, no, I didn't say that. The scope and sequence, right, I want to just be clear.
Okay, I was using scope and sequence wrong, I think. Go ahead.
No, the scope and sequence, so in other words, working from simple to complex doesn't change. The child, in terms of how long and how many practice opportunities, will be different. That's what changes. The brain operates the same way. That's what people have to know. We're all humans. The brain operates the same way. The intensity changes. But if you start with a structure, 98% of the kids should be able to read. That's my feeling.
We'll probably wrap up pretty soon, Faith, but I do want to just say one more shout out to you.
Thank you. Thank you for that. That's really helpful. I love the way you just said that.
I read with Elliot every day, but again, I even took some things away from this of the peer strategy. Now, I don't remember what it stands for right now. but even that was like, I was like, this is so simple. And like, it wouldn't be, I'm already reading to him. It's just like the questions I'm going to be asking and like making sure I'm asking those types of questions. And I just want to thank you again as a parent myself, but also like, I love the idea of giving this to other new parents because I'm always thinking like, what should I get for this baby shower? And I love the idea of giving this to them because it really is just like such great tips and ideas for things that are easy for parents, because I think, like you said, once they get to school and if the students are behind and then they hear from the teacher, like, hey, your child's struggling with reading, then the parent is like, they're in that place you described earlier. Just like, I don't even know what to do, and this really was helpful. And I appreciate it as a parent myself.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. And I just want to say one last thing. On that website, ifonlybooks.com, I'm going to say it again, that's where you could find out about the book. It's a helpful website, and I do offer a study guide to go with the book. And I want to give a shout out to Gail Morrison, who's in publishing.
We love Gail.
We love Gail. Yes,
we love Gail.
Love Gail. And she actually helped me a little with this. I had the questions, but she gave me some helpful tips in terms of how it should be structured and making sure you put page numbers near questions. And I was like, duh, yes, of course I should do that. And that was perfect. So, along the way, I've made so many wonderful friends. And I just wanted to put out the website, ifonlybooks.com. And my friend Cheryl created that for me as well. And there's also another document on that website called Can You See Me that I'm giving away for free. That also is fantastic in terms of getting community members to just recognize when a child is struggling and how a child could go up in school and be seen, but not really be seen. And so take a look at that. It's there for free.
We're going to link them all. We're linking all of these things. And I'm also thinking now, I kind of want to get one of these for Presley's teacher every year. As I just think it could be that easy, right? Like, hey, thank you for working with my kiddo.
Yeah.
Here's instead of, this with a Starbucks gift card. I love these free resources. The study guide, I know that Trey used that. So that was really cool to see that in action. What it must have been full circle for you. And I've personally shared the Can You See Me with a friend of mine whose kiddo is a struggling reader. And I was like, he is not failing. The system is failing him. So let's look at this. And she loved it. So thank you for that resource from our community here.
You are very welcome. And it's just amazing what I've been hearing. I have this friend also in social media, Jeff Vaughn, who's in Hungary, and he works at a university, and he's using the books with ENL, with people where English is not the first language, and they are really cool. Going to be teaching others. So it's all pedagogy, using that book as a resource. I'm like, wow, the book is actually in a university classroom. So that's another person I just want to put out there, Jeff Vaughn. And so we're a community. You are part of my community.
We'll talk to you again soon.
So
same. Thank you for being part of ours. Thank you.
Thank you. This was a pleasure. I look forward to talking to you again. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening, literacy lovers. Remember, we have a new episode out every Friday, and we send a super helpful newsletter with follow-up content each Tuesday.
Be sure to visit our website to subscribe to our newsletter and podcast. It's literacypodcast.com. And don't forget to follow us on Instagram and Twitter at Literacy Podcast.
And please reach out with questions or ideas for podcast episodes. We love hearing from you. Melissa, what's our email address?
Melissa and Lori at literacypodcast.com.
We are so glad you're here to learn with us.